Okay, here's the project we're going to be doing today. It's my Fall Blessings pumpkin cut. This is a signature surface on my website. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to get started on this project. I've got my paints sorted out here, and I really am not sure what colors I'm going to be using. So I like to put them in my little basket here upside down, and then I can look at the shades of colors or the tones and see which ones that I like to use. And I like to do it this way because when I'm done painting, if there are any that are still upright or if there are any that are still upside down like this, I know that I did not use it in my project, and I can remove it from the basket. And then again, I may add more colors to it. Now this is a wooden placemat that I had my husband cut out for me. This placemat will be available on my website. So we're going to get going on this. My first thing that I want to do is do some, I have to move my paints over here. I can't reach them over my easel here. I want to start by floating on my project here. So I'm going to use a 3/4 inch angle brush. If you have a 1 inch, that would be great to use as well. We're going to dry brush after we float. After the floating dries, we'll dry brush on this as well. I want to start with, let's see. I base coated this in persimmon. So I think I'm going to float some Georgia clay on here first. Get my sections defined a little bit. We're going to be adding leaves and all that on top of here. So I want to get this going first. So I'm going to start with this color, and I may come back and change it. Now, this is a fairly wide float, so I want my brush to be a little wetter than usual because I want my float to go over as far as I can get it. So I'm going to load the brush with plenty of paint in it. And I'm going to make it a wide float. So I've got it over. You can see that's a wide float right there. I've got it over in my brush at about halfway going across my brush. And you want to have your mop brush ready for this. Okay, and we want to float on the back sides of each one of these sections. See, I'm already running out of water. So I just went and picked up some more. I'm laying my brush flat, light pressure. Right up to here. Now I want to bring some of that over a little bit. So I'm going to kind of walk it out, and then I'm going to mop. I think I'm going to need a bigger mop brush for this project. So I will grab a bigger one as soon as I'm done here. And I am just very gently tapping that. I'm going over into the paint, but it is a gentle, gentle tap. And I've picked up a lot of paint on my brush here. So I want to go clean that off. We don't have to try and make that float come way over because we're going to dry brush onto there when we're done, once it dries. I'm going to pick up a bigger mop brush here. Okay, so let's go do the next section. Now, when you have a bigger float like this, you can pre-wet it with just water. not a lot of water, just get it damp, and that will help your paint move a little bit easier. Your brush won't dry out so quickly. This mop brush is a little bit fluffier. It's not as tight as this mop brush. So I lightly, very lightly brush on that water edge to blend that out a little bit. I need to clean this other mop brush. I don't want the paint to dry in my mop brushes. They're very, very easy to clean. You just go to a damp place and clean it off, and then go to a dry place and dry it off. Just easy as that. I like the white mop brushes. You can get them in white or black because I can tell when they're dirty. So I know they need cleaned. I try to clean them after each mopping, but it doesn't always happen. Alright, let's move on to this other side here. I'm laying the brush flat, and I'm giving gentle pressure. Now I'm going to walk it out a little bit. I'm going to pick up a little bit more paint. So I want to walk that out just a little bit. And I just kind of dab it all along there. It's a pumpkin. You don't have to worry about it having a smooth texture. And you see how much paint I picked up off of that when I was mopping it. So I'm going to dry that over here on my paper towel. Get a wet spot big enough for this mop brush. Okay, just keep going along on these sections. More water and more paint. Use your water bottle and spray some water drops on your palette that you can go pick up on the water edge of your brush. Very, very softly. I'm brushing that. Very, very, very softly. Too much pressure and you're going to remove everything that you just worked hard to get on there. Now, for any of you who have never painted with me before, when I'm talking about my water drops, I just take a misting bottle and I spray, usually on the whole left side or right side of my palette. I will cover it with water drops, and then when I need water, when I'm floating, I go over on the water edge of my brush and I pick up some water, and then I go load my paint. I'm going and picking up usually water and paint every time I leave my surface here. Okay, I want to let that dry, and then we're going to float along the bottom here with that same color. Clean my mop brush real quick. Okay, I want to paint the stem up here. And I think I will base coat that in with cocoa. So I've used that color. I'm going to turn it right side up in my container here. And I'm going to grab a, what do I have? I have a 1/2 inch flat. It's a low Cornell. I'm waking my brush up in water. You always want to wake your brushes up and then lay it on your paper towel and get the excess water out. Now, it's up to you if you want to paint the edges of this with this color as well. I think I'm going to keep my colors more to the surface and keep my edges just that orange color, that persimmon color. Now, of course, with that persimmon underneath this, it will take a couple of coats of this to get it the true opaque color of this. And it's you want to keep it kind of jagged here. Not sure what thought I had in my head just a second ago. So hopefully it will pop back in. Oh, I know what it was now. The back side of this, you could paint a whole completely different pattern on here if you wanted to. And have two separate little... Okay, I want to erase my graphite lines here before I go any farther. Because if I don't erase them now, and I get them set, if I get paint on them, they're set. And they won't come off. So I'm going to go ahead and erase them. This is just a little swivel white eraser. You can find it online, many art supply places. You can find just about anything on Amazon. It's a Faber-Castell, I guess is what how you pronounce that. If you have a place in your town that sells art supplies for colleges and grafting and stuff like that, they will more than likely probably have an eraser like this. And you can get refills for them. This just pops apart and that pops out, and put a new one in when it gets down so low that you can't erase with it anymore. Alright, I want to make sure this is all off of my project and off of my painting table because I don't want to pick it up in a brush accidentally. Alright, let's get a second coat on the cocoa. When I do my first coats, actually when I do any of my base coating, I generally will thin my paint out with water. Just a little bit to have it go on more smoothly. I don't like ridges in my paint, and if I put it on too thick, then the ridges are going to be there. So I like to thin it down with a little bit of water so that I have control of the paint. The paint doesn't try to have control of me. And then gently just smooth it out. Alright, let's float along the bottom here with that Georgia clay color. Go all along the bottom here. Going back and picking up paint and water. And let's gently mop that. Any loose mop hairs off of there. Clean the mop brush. And then dry it on a dry spot. I tend to have a pile of paper towels next to me, so I'll have a dry one. Okay, let's shade underneath the stem up here. I'm going to go to a smaller brush. Okay, these brushes I really like. They're low Cornell curved flat, and they come in 3 sizes, a 12, a 10, and a 6. They're wonderful for floating. I don't know what it is about the brushes being cut this way, but they make the floating very soft. So I'm going to put some of that Georgia clay. I'm waking my brush up. And I'm going to put some of that Georgia clay on my brush, on the toe, just like I would if it was an angle brush. Okay, now I'm going to go around this stem. Create some shading around it. Kind of define my stem a little bit more here. My dog is snoring. She's always snoring whenever I seem to be videotaping. It's like her little signal here. Okay, I'm just taking the water edge of my brush, kind of softening that, working it out a little bit. Alright, I'm going to mop that just slightly. Okay, let's draw in on our stem here, and this is just a dressmaker's pencil I got at Michael's, and it comes with white, pink, and green lead. And why I like to use these is because once I get paint on them, they're not set, they kind of go away with the paint. So I want this stem to have a top like that, and I know that it's not quite cut for that style of top, so if you like yours to be more like, you know, that, then which you really can't see since I have 2 separate lines on there, so if you like it to be more like that, you can do it like that, but I think I'm going to keep mine like that, create that little top there. Okay, I want to do some shading. Start out with some burnt umber. Now, because my bottles have been upside down, all the paint's run to the top, so I want to try and make sure that I tap it down a little bit before I open it so it doesn't come just pouring out of the top of that. Alright, I'm going to use that same 12 curve flat and just start creating a little bit of definition in this stem. So I know that this is going to I'm laying my brush down flat, and I have gentle pressure. That's how you keep your... One way you can keep your float soft is not to have such forceful pressure on it. Okay, now down here, I want to create some, you know, like ridges within my stem here. So I want the inside of this to be darker. I could go to a smaller brush if I so chose to do. I think I will move over and do this one. And I'll flip it around so I can do the other side of it. I'm not too worried right now about getting that color into my pumpkin itself, but because I probably will go and shade with this color underneath that stem anyway. Oops. Okay, I want to get you on camera. And more water. You can see it was dragging there. And let's mop that. Okay, I want to do the outside edges of this stem. Mop it. Clean my mop brush off. Okay, I want to get my lines erased off of there before I go any further on that. Alright, I got my graphite lines erased. Now I want to take a little bit of this burnt umber and go ahead and shade underneath, especially in these more deeper areas around this stem. I'm just gently pushing that brush up in there. Create those shaded areas underneath that. Alright, now on these, I'm going to come back and deepen in there with soft black, but I want to go along the outside edges of these and put a little float. Gentle, gentle pressure when you're floating. That's how I do my floating. Now, if you do your floating another way that works really great for you, then certainly continue to do it that way. Don't try to mimic what I do unless you have not developed a style yet of floating that you like. Used to be when I started painting that you had to float a certain way and you had to, you know, paint this a certain way, and I I just kind of over the years kind of learned to do my own thing, and I get the same results. So you've got to work out what best works for you. Alright, I'm going to get some soft black out because I want to deepen right inside there. I'm just going to pick it up on that same brush. I'm not going to worry about cleaning it. And I just want to kind of push this up in to that really defined area right there. Like I said, you can go to a much smaller brush. I am very much used to using a larger brush, so I don't get intimidated or worry about it. So I have to come back and do that. It needs to be a little bit darker. Come at this one this way. This with that soft black, and I think I'll do just a very thin washy float of it around the edges. Okay, I think I'm going to go to my 6 curved flat, and I want to shade underneath this whole thing with burnt umber, and then I want to come back in those deep areas and re-intensify that with some soft black. I think it needs floating all along the whole thing. Kind of dirty it up a little bit. And we'll come back and do some highlighting on here. We're going to use our liner to create some more character in this. I think the reason I don't use a smaller curved or angle or whatever I'm using, whatever style of brush I'm using, is because you have to go back and load it so much more frequently. And it gets kind of tedious sometimes. But I do need this smaller brush for getting into those tighter little areas where we put that initial burnt umber. More here. Okay, I think I'm going to stay with this brush right here. Just a little darker right there. And each one of these, where that darkest little groove would be. Okay, I want to highlight on this with khaki tan. Tapping it back down into the bottle. Okay, I'm going to go with the 12 curved flat to start out with. start up here. Get some highlight up here on that part of the stem. I think I'm going to dirty that up with a little bit of our base color. Kind of tone it down a little bit. So I went into some of the cocoa. Just kind of walking that over a little bit. And my brush, gently. Toning it down with the initial base color, the cocoa, will help us not to get too bright too quick. So I just pick up a little bit of both colors on my brush and just brush mix that. And it's okay if, you know, if you have to do it every time and it doesn't match the previous color. It doesn't have to, as long as it's in the same tone. You're going to be good. So don't feel like you have to go mix a great big puddle for it. We're going to do some dry brushing on this too. I didn't intend to do that side. Because I had shaded on that side. But we'll see how that looks. Okay, I need to go up here and redo this. Whoa, because it is lighter than everything else. I need to tone that just a little bit. Now I think we'll go into straight khaki tan. Work that into that area a little bit more. We're going to add some shades of greens and oranges on here as well. I need to put some more water on my palette here. I have my ceiling fan on low. I probably should turn it off because it's drying out my water too quickly. Alright, we're getting that to look more rustic looking. More fall. Just the look we're going for. Okay, now I want to, let's see, I'm going to get some light buttermilk. Or some sand. Let's see, I've got light buttermilk here in my basket. So, I'm going to highlight that just a little bit more. I'm going to have to come back and shade on one side or the other of this because I originally had a shade there and I went over it with a highlight. Okay, light buttermilk. This will be our brightest little highlight here. So I don't want it to take over. Okay. I don't want this highlight to be super strong. So let's mop that back. That's a little bright to me. We'll see when we get some lines in here. I may have to wash over it with the Alright, let's put some lines in there. I'm going to use a 10-0 liner, and I think I'll do some burnt umber lines in this. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of streak up through this. Now I've thinned my paint with water. You can't really, unless you're using a liner to do a very small area or just some dots, it's very hard to use a liner without having your paint thinned with water. Bring some of this down. And do across here. Do a couple of streaks of khaki tan on there as well. Little lines on there. Don't have my paint quite thin enough so it doesn't want to flow off of my brush. If you get it too thin, it kind of disappears onto your piece. And too thick, it just, you have to put too much pressure on your brush and it just drags. So it's kind of a fine line there. Okay, I need this edge defined a little bit more on the top side. So let's see. Let's go with a little bit of burnt umber and mix in some of our base color, which is cocoa. I went back to my 12 curved flat. I'm just gently kind of washing a float along that edge. Kind of dirty that up a little bit. Alright, let's dry brush a little bit of green on there. Let's go with avocado. And I think on this top edge up here, it's kind of bothering me. I don't know if it's because it's such a straight edge right there. I'm going to put a little bit of burnt umber along that. Oops. A little bit of burnt umber with some cocoa mix. And then I'm just going to dirty brush straight into light buttermilk, and I am just barely tickling that on there. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, we're going to go with some avocado. I'm going to dry brush some of that on there. And I'm going to use a, let's see what kind of brush I got here. I'm going to use this domed stencil brush here. It's a royal, pretty stiff little brush. So how you load this is you take it dry and you dip it into paint. Then you go to a dry paper towel. You kind of work it into the brush and then rub off as much of it as you can. Now, when you go to your piece to start, first of all you want to make sure it's completely dry. And then you want to start with very light pressure, because you don't know how much is going to come off. And then as you see how it's coming off of the brush, you can start giving it more and more pressure. Okay, now I want to pop off any excess. I'm going to go into the Georgia clay, or you could go into persimmon, either one. I'm going to do it twice because there's too much green still in the brush and it dirtied it up a little bit more than what I wanted it to be. So I work it into the brush and then I go wipe off any excess. Okay, now we're just going to put a little bit of this orange color up in here. Okay, that's got our stem done until we get everything down here, and we see if we want to bring some of the colors that we put down here up in there. Okay, so we've got our first shading done here, and I think I want to take, I don't want this to get too overwhelming because it's the background, but I still want it to look pretty detailed. So I'm going to do a second float on here. And I'm going to brush mix Georgia clay and burnt umber. And let me get some, I'm going to clean this stencil brush out a little bit here on my... Now, a quick note about these stencil brushes or scruffy brushes, whatever you're using, that if you know you're going to be using it in another area, if you wash them out, they take a long time to dry. But if you use some hand sanitizer and clean it out with that, they are like 99% alcohol. And it takes the paint right out, and then it dries very quickly because it is alcohol. Let's see, a little bit of burnt umber here. So that is a good tip to keep in mind. I need some more water on my palette here. Alright, burnt umber and the Georgia clay. We are going to do a second float. Now this time I am going to take some water and show you how to pre-wet. So I just went with my flat brush and I dipped it in water and then I laid it on my paper towel, because I don't want this dripping wet with water, but I do need it along that edge right there. So I've got my brush loaded. Okay, I'm going to lay it flat, and I just went over my previous line, which I don't want to do, so I'm taking that wet brush that I used and just going to wipe that back. Oops, just loaded the wrong side of my brush. Alright, let's try that again. Okay, this is just darkening this up, this Georgia clay a little bit. Okay, I'll mop that. Gently, 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 gently. And you'll lose mop hairs. Not a big deal. They brush right off when it's completely dry if they get stuck in the water or any paint or anything. Alright, wetting my brush. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do this whole side. I may do both sides so that you get a good idea of how that works. I do like to do it when I'm doing a very large area. And this might be considered large to some of you. And you don't necessarily have to use this as a placemat. You can display it in an easel and just set it out for fall. It's one of those little versatile pieces that doesn't necessarily have to be just a placemat. Okay, I did not pre-wet this side, so I've got to make sure I get loaded good. And I'm just doing light pressure, and don't feel like you have to get your float all in one big long stroke there. Go to a smaller mop here. Very gently. Okay, let's move to the other side here. I'm going to wet the side. Load my brush. I just brush mix every time instead of just making a puddle. I just think it's easier that way. I don't feel like the color has to be exactly the same color as you did in a previous area, especially when they're separated like this. Because pumpkins have, you know, deeper grooves and indentations, and they're not all going to be looking perfect. This is all just background anyway. Okay, clean that a little bit. Get a bigger paper towel, I think. Alright. See, I ran out of paint and water there. This is such gentle pressure that I'm doing on this brush when I float, because I want that to stay as soft as possible. And if I put too much pressure on there, it's going to move the paint over and make a really hard line. And I don't want that hard line. I'm going to shade on the top of this pumpkin because I want my highlight to be right here in the center. So I'm going to go ahead with this same color and make a little bit deeper. Bring this shading down a little bit. And I'm just tapping this in here. To mop it before it dries. I know that I don't do things the traditional way, but I kind of have developed my own little style of painting, and which makes it way more enjoyable for me. So if you know, like I said, if you've got a style and a way that you like to float and do things, I tend to use more water when I'm floating than probably normal people. But I feel like I can get a better result, and I have more control over my brush when I use more water. Alright, let's get that mopped before it dries. Okay, let's start creating some highlights on this pumpkin. And I'm going to start with, what do I have here? Jack-o'-lantern orange. See how that's going to look. I'm going to like that or not. Put the mop brush off here a little bit. Alright, let's start with this jack-o'-lantern orange. All my mop hairs off my piece. I'm still using this 3/4 inch angle. Mop. I'm going to sneak up on this highlight here. Oh, grabbed a different mop brush. This one is losing all kinds of bristles out of it. Whew, man. Lots of mop bristles out of that one. Maxine's mops. These purple handled ones are from Low Cornell. They are the best ones. And then this one is a Joe Sonia one. It is a wonderful one as well. But I don't have big ones in those brushes. I just have some cheaper brand that I picked up. Gently. Okay, we need to lighten that now, so I am going to take that orange, that jack-o'-lantern orange, and I'm going to add a little bit of marigold to it. And get this on here. I want to get it dry, and then we're going to start doing some dry brushing. So I'm going to brush mix marigold and jack-o'-lantern. Probably a little more jack-o'-lantern than marigold. I just want to lighten up that jack-o'-lantern color a little bit. And I want to try and walk that out. Mop that before it dries. Gently, gently blend it. As you add more highlights, your highlight area will get smaller and smaller within that highlight. Got a hard line there. I do not like that, although a leaf will probably be covering that. I still don't like it. Same down here. So I'm just taking the water edge of my brush, kind of softening that back a little bit. Gently. I don't know, on the video it may look like I'm rubbing that kind of hard, but I am just using the gentlest pressure ever. Up hairs. Gently, just blending that. I have to get all the mop hairs off of it when it gets completely dry here. Water, need more water. Never had a mop brush lose so many mop hairs. Crazy. Tap, 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 tap. Very lightly. Okay, I want to get this completely dry now. And we're going to start doing a little bit of dry rubbing here. So I've got a little portable fan, as soon as I find where I put it. And it's just a fan that I bought at Walmart for less than $2. And it already has the batteries in it. And not really sure what I did with it. Oh, but I have quite a few of them because I take them when I'm teaching. Doesn't make a lot of noise, so if you take it with you to a paint class, you're not going to disturb anyone. Alright, let me get all of these little hairs off of here. Okay, I'm going to use a much larger stencil brush now, and this is a Royal Large dome stencil type brush. Let's start with the Georgia clay. Now you're going to do this the exact same way that you did before, where you load the paint on the brush and you work it in on your paper towel, and then you start unloading as much of the paint as you can. Oh, flip the brush out of your hand. And then when you go to your piece, you want to start with light pressure, because you don't really know, I mean, there's still a lot of paint in that brush, but you don't really know exactly how much is going to be coming off. So we just want to start gently rubbing this color and creating some better definition within this. Sorry, this is making so much noise. I need to get a different table. This one has a terrible, terrible bow in the center of it. It makes my easel bounce around when I'm painting on it. So that's on my to-do list. Okay, we're just going next to where we shaded, and then we're doing the top and the lower edges of each section. We're kind of walking that out a little bit next to our shaded area, into the pumpkin a little bit. Very light pressure, because I don't know how much is going to come off of that when I rub, and I don't want too much. The bottoms and the tops of each section, and then the shaded area, and getting less and less pressure as you get towards that highlighted area. Now we're going to come back and put a little bit of burnt umber on our brush to blend into that orange, because these are the two colors we originally used to shade. We want to keep that. See, I've got, my brush is too wet. It's leaving a little bit of streakiness there. And I know that we're going to have leaves on here and some acorns and different things, but I still don't want to have any harshness. And you want to do shape following on these segments. So you this will not go out as far as that previous color. This is going to stay mostly right there where we shaded. I'm just going back to the wet spot on my paper towel and picking up can do a much smaller brush than this when you get into these more defined areas. I don't have to use one this big. Okay, I'm going to use the brush that I had earlier and do some highlights on here. So we're going to start with the jack-o'-lantern orange. And I think I'm just going to go straight into mixing it on my brush because the highlight is defined there pretty well. And I want to keep that tone there. This brush is a little bit dirty from that previous color, so I don't want to mix that. I'm going to just go into, let's see, let me find a little bit smaller one. This one is a medium. It doesn't feel like I got it cleaned out very good last time I used it. I'm just working that into the brush there on my palette, and then I'm going to go wipe off any excess. Okay, I'm going to come right in here. I just want to start rubbing this and working it in towards the center. This is where all of the brightest area of this pumpkin is going to be. And I could go with that bigger brush. I've already got this one loaded, so I'm just going to stick with it. I will have to work a little bit harder with this one, but that's okay. So light pressure to start with, because I don't know how that's going to come off. But I want to walk this over into the whole middle of this pumpkin. Make sure I shape follow. As I have less and less paint, I can give more and more pressure on this brush because there's still paint in it. Leave little dusty stuff on there. I should just wipe that off. Okay, I'm going to go into straight Marigold now. And I went and picked up my larger brush that had some of that orange in it, but that's okay. I am just going to get a little bit brighter right here. I'm going to glaze over this. Now remember, the pumpkin is just the background. It's not going to be the main focus on here. So I don't want you to feel too stressed out about it. Okay, I want to glaze over this pumpkin with some tomato red. And this is going to be a very, very, very thin wash of color. So I'm going to put some on my palette. I don't need very much. And I'm just going to go ahead and use the oval wash brush. Okay, this is a 1-inch one. And I'm going to soak my brush in some water. And then I'm going to lift it out of the water and wipe my brush on the edges of my basin. And then I'm going to come over here and create a wash. I need more water because I don't want it to be that bright. Okay, I've got a nice puddle of wash here. So I'm going to lay my brush on my paper towel, get the excess water and paint out of it. And I will just go straight here and pick this up, and I'm just going to start washing the whole pumpkin. And I need more water. This needs to just very easily come off of your brush. It's just, it's like a little glaze of color on this pumpkin. And you think, oh, that little bit of red's not going to make a difference, but it really does make a difference. More water, pull a little bit more of that red out there. I like to use a large brush when I'm doing a large project because you don't want to have any brush streaks or anything in this, so you have to work fairly quickly because water dries pretty quick. And just that little bit of red glaze on there makes such a difference. Okay. Alright, I can see on my stem I need to rub some more burnt umber on there, or soft black, either one, because it's not quite dark enough. So let's put a little bit soft black with that. Just want to dirty this up a little bit. Alright. It's looking pretty good. Got to get this dry and then get my pattern transferred on here. Okay, I got my pattern on and did some base coating, and I finished the leaves and berries and things on this side so I could see where I wanted to go on this side. So I wanted to tell you the colors that I base coated my leaves in, and you can pick and choose whatever leaves you want for your base colors, but I used avocado for the green, tomato red on the red ones, marigold on the yellow ones, cocoa on the tan ones, and Georgia clay on the orange ones. Now the orange ones don't show up too much right now, but as you can see over here, this one started out orange. I think that's the only other orange one I had on here. So you just add whatever colors that you like to go in there, and that's all I did around this piece, was add take all of my base colors as well as my shading and highlighting colors that I used for within the piece, and just spread them out throughout the leaves, creating those fall beautiful colors there. So I'm going to do a couple of leaves here and show you how I went about doing them. I'm going to try and finish out two completely because it's not really going to matter what colors you use where, you know. It's really, truly going to be a personal preference. I did try to keep in the red leaves more of the dark greens, and I used a little bit of yellow in this one. But in this red one here, I used more of the lighter oranges in it, as well as the darker greens. So, and when I did this, I just picked up colors randomly and sporadically on my brush. I didn't worry about cleaning my brush. I just, you know, picked up colors. So I want you to not stress out about it. Just go for it and pick out some colors that you like. Now on this one here, I started to float some red on there, but I'm not sure if I'm going to like that completely. So I'm going to go with some oranges. So I'm just going to put some colors out here. All of the colors that are on my list, basically, I will have out on my palette. So I'll keep my oranges and my yellows together, and my greens and my purples I will put together. I didn't put too much purple in the leaves. Just some touch here and there since I had these purple berries. So I didn't want to get too carried away with that. But I do have it out on my palette. So I'm just going to get the rest of these colors out here. Keep my browns together, my cocos and my burnt umber. Khaki tan I only used for my acorns. So I'm not going to put that out. Got some olive green here. Light buttermilk. I didn't really use light buttermilk in anywhere but the berries and down here on this. So get my tomato red out here. And moon yellow. I think everything else I've got out. So I've just got these colors out of my palette. Just here, there, and everywhere. And so now you just get to pick and choose what you want your leaves to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and start on this one because it's a lighter color leaf and you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So I am going to dip into some persimmon and maybe pick up a tiny bit of Georgia clay on my brush. That will give it a little bit of leaning more towards the red side with that Georgia clay, depending on how much of that you put on there. So now I'm just going to float it and kind of walk it out. This is all I did to the other ones. And then take my mop brush and soften that water edge. Gently, gently tap into that paint. Barely tap into that paint because I don't want to remove it. Okay, and then go clean your mop brush. So I like this orange color for my yellow leaf. I'm going to go down here and put it in this leaf down here. I put some orange in this one, a little bit of olive green, and some green and orange mix down here, and put some purple in there. So I'm going to go down to this one down here. And this is a bigger leaf, so I could go to a much bigger brush. But I think I'll just stick it out with this one. I've got my float quite a ways over onto my brush here, so it may make it a little bit wider float than I want, but I'm going to give it a shot. Now I kept the lighter colors more towards the left side, so the light is kind of in the middle and diffusing out. So when I do these over here on this side, I will want to keep the light a little bit more on the right side. And then before I paint my letters in, I will go back and add some of these colors, dry brush them into the background, and create a highlight right here in the middle. Not too bold because, as I said, the pumpkin is the background. The leaves are the focal point. But I'll be putting my lettering on there, and so I want to get a little bit of more lightness in there before I put that lettering on. So I'm just going to walk this out a little bit. Just pat it out, kind of blend it out there, and then take my mop brush, just softly. Now, if you don't do softness with your mop brush, you will just dig a hole right in that paint. I did a class one time where a gentleman I was showing how to use a mop brush, and before I could get around to him, he had already dug a hole completely. We were doing pears. He had already dug a hole completely in the middle of his pear. So then we had to repair that. So now I'm still on this leaf here, and I've got some burnt umber on my brush, and right now I'm going to go ahead and create just a little vein up the center. I could have done that on the other side as well, which probably would have been better since my darker colors are going to stay this side. So I want to put a little bit of this burnt umber down here. Not too much of it. It's supposed to represent an oak leaf, but I wasn't being too literal with my leaves. I just wanted some shapes in there and colors that I liked. So if you want to be a little bit more literal with how a leaf is supposed to be colored for that particular leaf, then that's your option on that. Okay, I did go ahead and wash my brush out since I had that dark color in there. So now I want to pick up some olive green, and I think I'm going to add a tiny bit of avocado to that, just so it's not quite so bright. And I want to put some of this here on my yellow leaf. Now, when I paint leaves, even though I've got the shape here, I tend to do like a wiggling motion as I paint my leaf. And then I just kind of pat walk it out, get some of that color moved down onto that leaf, and then gently mop. When you see me going back and forth like this, I'm still just feather touch there. Hardly any pressure whatsoever. I think with that orange, I'm just going to wipe that green off of my brush. But with the orange, I think I will add a tiny bit of yellow to that, just to tone it a little bit. And I want to create the vein in this leaf. So I think it's going to come from here and curve up this way. So I want to bring that out. Now you can create your veins by doing what? Well, I'll just do it on this one just so you see. You can create just a straight line like that, or you can come back and do a opening so you won't quite go up to that one, and then as you get closer to the top, you'll just make them meet. And then you've got an automatic highlight down the center of that vein if you want to do it that way. Let's see, now I want to go back to this one, and I think I'm going to put some greens on there. So I'm going to go with avocado and a little bit of black green mixed in with that. I just want a little bit of green on this one. So this is a little bit too thin, so I'm going to pick up a little bit more paint and wipe the water out of my brush. Okay, now I'm just kind of walking that out. Mop that gently. A little hard line right there. Not quite liking that. I want to put some green next to this vein here. Okay. Just gently mop that. Okay, I've got a yellow one and a brown one, so let me do an orange one so that you can see. The green ones are going to be pretty basic. You know, using your light and dark green values, and then just dry brushing in some reds or oranges into those green ones. I think they're going to be pretty basic. So I'm going to go ahead and do an orange and a red leaf so you can see how I did all the colors. So with the orange one, okay, on the orange one, I'm going to, I picked up the yellows, the moon yellow, no, marigold and cat yellow. Excuse me, I don't think I even have moon yellow out on my palette, so I better get that out. Okay, there we go. So, I've got some cad yellow and some marigold on my brush here. And on this orange one here, the orange ones are a little bit, you know, you can go with some reds out here, or some greens. But I really wanted the edge of this to stand out. So I'm just gonna, this will fade back in there quite a bit. So let me tap that out. You know, it looks pretty bright on the camera. It does not look, on the camera it looks almost like light buttermilk, but in front of me it's definitely more a yellow than that color. Okay, I'm just going to wipe my brush off and not worry about cleaning. I'm going to pick up some avocado, and I think I'm going to go around this leaf with the avocado. Now I don't want my orange to fade, to be completely covered up. I want you to know that this is an orange leaf. So too much water on my brush there. So I want to walk this out. And if I end up, you know, covering up too much of my orange, I will just take the orange base color and work some of that back in there when we do the dry brushing part. Okay, I'm gonna go back to this one here and add some burnt umber down here on this bottom section of this. On both sides, it's down on the lower part. Alright, I want to work on the yellow one, and I'm going to take some avocado, tiny bit of olive green, and I'm going to work that in on this side over here. That is way too bright, so let me go into some avocado and a tiny bit of black green. I don't want it to be quite that bright. Blend that down in there. Now, I don't want to lose my yellow, because this is a yellow leaf. I don't want to lose that. Okay. Let's go with some oranges on there. So I'm going to pick up some Georgia clay, a little tiny bit, and some persimmon. And let's work that in up here. You can pick and choose all over your leaf where you want these colors to be. A little bit more right there. Okay, I'm going to go back to this one, and I want to get some more green in there, so I'm going to do some avocado, tiny bit of black green in there. over. Gently, gently mop. So we'll be able to intensify that with our dry brushing later. I want to get this yellow a little bit brighter, so I will wash out my brush this time because I don't want that green mixed in with my yellow. So I'm going to pick up Marigold and a little bit of Moon Yellow. Try and get this yellow just a little bit brighter on here. I'm just going to kind of walk it out. Mop, mop, mop. Okay, I'm going to take my light colored orange, which is jack-o'-lantern orange, and mix a little bit of cad yellow in with that. I still want to keep this on the orange side. A little bit more of that jack-o'-lantern orange in there. Kind of walk that out. That's got a lot of water in that. So it is really going to fade down into that. Oops. Okay, let's put a vein in that with some greens. A little bit of avocado, a little bit of black green. And I really should be putting this vein on this side. I want to keep the lighter colors. Out that other way on the right side. Okay, I'm going to have to deepen that just a little bit down here. Now, like I said, over here on this side, I did the vein where it was separated like this. So that is a personal preference on what you choose to do, depending on how much work you really want to put in to those veins. Okay, I'm going to leave that one there for just a minute. I want to work on the, I really need that one brighter, much brighter than what it is. It is just fading down in there. So I'm going to, excuse me, take a little bit of my red, and I think I'll go with Georgia clay. I will just tone that red down just a little bit. I want this a lot brighter than what it is. I'm going to go straight into burnt umber. Just dirty brush right in there. Get some of that on here. Put some of it down here. Get some water on my brush here. More water. Alright. Let's soften that. Okay, so I'm going to go into some green. Still dirty brush. A little bit more green over here. Your leaves don't have to have this many colors going on in them. However you choose to make them look, they're going to look fabulous. Okay, I'm going to work on the red one. I'll just stay down here on this one since I've kind of got this going right here. Alright, I want to go into some black green. And a little bit of avocado. I'm just going to mix that on my brush. The first thing I want to do is create the stem in here. So I'm going to get more water. And work that stem in there. I am going to do this one where it's separated. Laying my brush flat, giving it light pressure there. Okay, I want to take some avocado on my brush. I'm going to leave that other mix on there. I'm just going to pick up some more avocado and work it in. And I want to put some of this green on this side. Lightly tap that. Okay, we're going to have to walk that out a little bit. I think I'll go ahead and work that green down lower. So I'm going to pick up some water and some more paint. I'm going to go ahead and work it down into this part of the leaf. Okay, I want to put some oranges, I think, on this one. So I will wash my brush out, and I'm going to go into the jack-o'-lantern orange. It's a much lighter orange, a little bit more transparent than the other oranges. So it'll be a good one to start with to see how well I'm going to like this. It's not too bad. I think it's a good one to start with, and then we can deepen it. I don't want it to just fade down into the background there. So we're going to keep it up here in this area. Just lightly tap that in there. Gently mop that. And I think I'll put just a little bit of burnt umber in my brush. And maybe put a little bit of that down here. Not too much of it. Okay, this one here, I want a little bit more of that yellow in there. So I think I'll take the Marigold, that on my brush, and I'm going to just kind of tap that in there. Going to excuse me, take some black green and deepen this over here on this side. I'll walk that out. think the orange here, I'm going to brighten that up a little bit, and then we're going to start doing some dry rubbing. I like how this one looks. I may do one more coat of avocado on this green side. A bit more water here. Ooh, too much water. So when I had too much water, I just went over and wiped it off on my paper towel, and then I picked up a little bit more paint because I had too much water. It had thinned my paint down too much. Okay. And then one more on this side. Just brighten that up a little bit. I just love fall colors, you know, and if you want to change these colors up, if you've got an idea in mind of some colors that you like, then just switch them up. Okay, let's put some more orange on here. Paint. This jack-o'-lantern orange is so transparent. It takes a little bit more paint on my brush to get, especially when I'm painting on top of this red. Get that to show up a little bit. Okay. I'm going to deepen this green here. A little bit of mix of avocado and black green. I've got this orange leaf right here that you probably can't see too well, but I will definitely be adding some colors to that one here. I just want to get these leaves done, show you how I dry brushed and got the veins in there, and then I'll go finish up those other leaves, and then we'll come back and do the berries and the acorns on there. Excuse me. Okay, we want to start dry brushing on here, and I'm just going to use this one's getting pretty worn on the end, but it will still do its job. This is a 3/8" Lowell Cornell Crescent brush. It's like a little stencil brush. I used it on some rock lawn. Did several table runners with rock lawn, and it has just worn the end of this out, but it will still do what we need it to do. Now, the one thing that I did not do, and this is total option for you, I did not get a new brush for every color. I just wiped out as much paint as I could, picked up the next color, and dirty brushed, and just kept going with the same brush. I did not wash my brush out until the very end when I was done. So that's something you may or may not want to do, but you don't necessarily have to wash your brush out. All right, let me get a paper towel. All right, so we did some dry brushing on the background, so it is the exact same technique. Just pick out what colors that you want to start with, and I started with some darker colors when I started. I think I started with the orange. So I've got orange here, a little bit here. So I'm going to go into the Georgia clay. Got it on my brush. Rub it off. Okay, then go into my orange areas. I'm just going to start rubbing some of this color on there. I want to brighten this up a little bit, but I also want it to soften down a little bit too, and this will help it. And I want my orange to stay orange, so I'm going to put some of this back into this leaf and just blend it into those areas. I may have to define this edge a little bit more with some yellow or some green. some red even. So let me do that real quick, because I don't want to lose this edge. I don't want it to fade into the background. Okay. Alright, that looks good. Okay, I put some color on this, but I wasn't done floating on it. I just realized I was doing 2 yellow ones, and I didn't want to do 2 yellow ones, but I want to get that color on there. Okay, I'm going to go down by the center there. Okay. Now I'm going to go get into some, let's go into some green. I'm going to go into Hauser. See, I just put it straight onto that dirty brush. Now I'm just going to rub it off. It will blend with that red, but that's okay. Or that orange. It will just make my green a little bit darker, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm just going to dry rub some of this onto that leaf. Here is some green. This is a very quick way to deepen the colors on your leaves without just constantly doing floating and walking it over. This just makes it so much faster. And I'm all about making my painting look like I worked hard, but really didn't. Okay, I'm going to go into some burnt umber. Same brush. Wipe that off. I want to darken this a little bit. I'm very softly blending that. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of this in there. Okay, now let's go into some red. Let's put the red back in here. Make sure we know this is a red leaf. I'll darken this a little bit since we put some red floating right there on that edge. Now I'm going to have to define that edge of that leaf right there. So I'm going to go into some Hauser green. Some avocado. Too much water. Okay. Mop that. And then I'm going to blend some orange into it. I'm going to pick up persimmon, I think. Rub that off on my paper towel. I'm going to pick it up again because it blended with that red and it made it a little bit darker than what I wanted. Okay, that's not quite dry. So let me rub some of this over here. I'm going to tone down very gently that yellow. Not too much because I want it to stay yellow on there. But I need some of this orange back in there. And then from this color we're going to go into some yellow. And you're thinking, ooh, such a dark color into some yellow. But yep, that's what we're going to do. Right into that marigold. And I'm going to do it twice. So I can just clean some of that orange out of my brush. So you see, we've got yellow. Okay. I want to put a little bit of that yellow back in here. I toned it down with the orange, and now I'm very gently rubbing on some of that yellow on top of there. So I'm going to go into cad yellow this time. I'm going to brighten up my yellow leaf there. So very gently. I want to make sure that this leaf looks yellow, and we know it's a yellow leaf, so I'm putting some yellow back in it. Not covering up all of my colors that I put in there, but I do want some yellow in there. Okay, now we're going to work on the veins, and I use a 10-0 liner, and I'm going to dip into some black green. I put water on my brush, I dipped into black green, then I dipped into some avocado and just mixed them on my brush. Okay, so I want to create the stem part down here. So I'm laying my brush flat, giving it a push, and then coming up on the tip and pulling it into the leaf. Okay, I'm not going to do that one because I want that stem to be on top of this leaf, and I need to finish that leaf first. So let's do some veining. I'm just going to keep this mix on my brush. A little bit more water in my brush. And then I'm going to create just some veins. Nothing, you don't have to do much because we don't want the veins to be the focal point. I do need more water in my brush though. You can't really use a liner brush unless you're making dots, unless you add some water to that. Okay, I'm going to put some, see, that's my orange leaf, so I'm going to pick up the persimmon. I want to create a vein down the center, just in case I lost it. Okay, I'm going to go into some of that green. I've still got some orange on my brush, but that's okay. Matter of fact, I think I want to mix a little bit of that orange in there because I don't want these to be too green. Now over here, they definitely have to be darker. So I'll go into the darker green. I'm just going to touch that back with my finger. I don't want it to be overpowering. Okay, this leaf here needs some veins, and I want to use some burnt umber in these. So I'm going to mix a little bit of burnt umber in with that mix that I've already got in there. I'm going to go ahead and just a little bit of the stem down here. But when I get that green leaf painted, I will probably put it on top of that green one. Add some green in there. Touch them back so they're not quite so stark on there. Okay, I think this leaf still needs more yellow, so I'm going to float some cad yellow on there. Because I've got my yellows over here is a little bit brighter. So I think it's too toned down right here, and I don't like how washed out it looks. Pick up some orange on that same brush. Just kind of blend it right there. And with that yellow a little bit. It looks not quite finished. I think it's because these other leaves are not done. So I'm going to go finish those leaves. Oh, let me put the veins on this one real quick. This one I want to do orange. So I'm going to do some persimmon and jack-o'-lantern orange mixed together. I'm going to go along each side of this vein, just to deepen that a little bit. And these veins are just squiggly little lines. Go down the center a little bit of yellow just to brighten that. Okay. Alright, I'm going to go finish these other leaves and then we'll do our berries and acorns. Okay, now we're going to get to working on the berries. I base coated them in with lavender, and these I base coated in with cocoa. No, khaki tan. Alright, so now we're going to shade on the berries with black plum. And I'm just going to use my number 6 curved flat. You could use a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch angle brush if you like, or if you are someone who likes to float with a flat brush, then get a small flat like an 8 or a 6. So I just did all the bottoms of these, and I will do 2 coats. And the reason that I like to do 2 coats is because the first coat kind of defines where that shading is going to be. And then the second one smooths it out. Makes that shading or that float just look spectacular. That's a little bit too far down in there. Let's see. I think I'll let that one be on top. You can pick and choose how your berries lay. You don't have to do it exactly like I do it. Already, just that little bit of shading really is making those berries pop. I just wanted another color element in this. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to put some kind of straw coming out around this or not. Berry up here. And then while that dries, before we do the second shading on that, I am going to shade on my acorns. And I'm going to use burnt umber, still using the same 6 flat. I'll just base them in with a small round brush. Okay, so I want to determine where the cap is. So I'm going to make the shading for the cap, and we're going to come back and intensify that with some soft black. So first I just want to get all the caps on here. This is just burnt umber. You can make as much or as little of that cap showing as you want. think this one is turned this way. Enough water there. Okay, oh, there's one more down here. Oh, and I forgot to shade these berries. Okay, now I want to take this same color, this burnt umber, and I want to go to just the left side of these. We will come back and go all the way around them the second time, but I want the deepest shading to be on that left side, so that when we come and do it again, it will darken that side. That one back there is going to be pretty dark because it's behind that other one. Get you on camera here would be helpful to you, wouldn't it? Okay, I just went about halfway on these acorns. Let me go back and do those berries that I missed. I added some berries down here because I just feel like this area down here is too open still. So I may have to go in and paint a leaf behind that. Okay, so I've got this color, this black plum on my brush, so I'm just going to go ahead and give the second shading. On these berries. See how that deepens that and smooths it out? Off camera again. I'm gonna have to turn my palette here. Get this. Oh, I had my grandson in here a while ago, and I think that we might have bumped this camera and got it not exactly where it was at before, so I have to be over a little bit farther. Could just be because I'm on this side of the piece as well. Alright, let's get another shading on those. I have to move my water drops because it keeps sticking my arm in it since I turned my palette. Burnt umber. And this time we're not going to go under the cap because we're going to come back and do that soft black, but we're going to go all the way around. Here's one I missed. All the way around them this time. going to pick up some soft black on that same brush. I'm not even going to worry about cleaning it. And I want to go underneath the caps. This soft black. Define that just a little bit more. Alright, now on these caps, I'm just going to pick up a 1 round. It's a Winsor Newton round. This is what I used to base them in. And I'm going to pick up both colors on my brush. I'm going to dip into the burnt umber and then go dip into the light buttermilk. So I will have both colors. Well, buttermilk's already setting up there. So I'll have both colors on my brush. And I'll just go back into that. And I'm just going to dab these colors onto the cap. I want the darker color to be towards the bottom of that cap and the lighter color at the top. I want to make sure I can see both colors, so if it starts getting a little we'll come back and do a little floating on there, but I want to give it the look of some texture on here. See, that one's already starting to get a little muddy, and woo woo woo. That was definitely a lot. If I'm seeing too much of one color, then I just go back on my palette and pick up the other color on my brush. Just a dab, dab, dab on there. If I feel like I have too much paint, I just go wipe it right off. A little bit more brown on this one. This one got kind of muddied up here. Okay, let's go on to the berries. And I'm going to take some light buttermilk and mix it with lavender. So lavender is what we based the berries in. So I'm just going to add a little bit of light buttermilk to that to get a really pale purple. This will be our first highlight. And then I didn't really worry about being too perfect with that. And that is way too far across my brush. So I wiped it off and reloaded here. I have to wash it. covering the berry a little bit more than I want it to. Okay. I did not shade those a second time, so I'm going to have to go back and do those. Now I'm just touching them back with my finger because that will remove a little bit of that highlight and not make it quite so bold. We're going to glaze over these with some ultramarine blue, and then we'll add a final highlight of just light buttermilk. Go ahead and highlight these ones down here that I forgot to put the second shading on. At least it does not look like I put a second shading on them, so I'm going to highlight them real quick. Looking around. Of course, berries aren't going to be perfect. Alright, let's get that second shading on those. Forgot to highlight on that one. That was a little bitty brush. I keep getting the paint way too far over on it. Okay. Now I want to wash over those, and I'm just going to use my little round brush, I think. I'm going to, I dipped my brush in water, okay, and it's full of water. So I'm going to pull some of this paint out here and make a puddle of very thin blue paint. And then I'm just going to glaze over these berries. Try and stay in the lines would be good. You could use a bigger brush. You could use a filbert. Flat. Even your curved flat would be fine. Whatever you can use to just fill in the grapes. You're covering the whole grape. And you see how it's taken it from this kind of flat purple to this just bold purple. Too much there. Too much water in my brush. Or glaze, I guess I should say. Okay, now we want to just take some thin light buttermilk, not very much on your brush, and we're just going to dab a little highlight right on that bold, right where we put the highlight. We're just going to put a little brighter. Now to finish up the caps on the acorns, we're just going to do a little highlight on the top with light buttermilk, just where we had that lighter edge. And then if you need to, you can do some burnt umber along that front edge if you lost some of your color there. We've still got that texture look, which is what I wanted. Then this will help separate those colors a little bit. Okay, we're going to use either our liner or our #1 round. We're going to dip into light buttermilk and burnt umber. Just have both of those on your stem and just pull a little stem into these. Have both of them on your brush, not on your stem. I was thinking stems, it said stem instead of brush. Okay, now while we have that brush, I want to get a little soft black on it. And I just, on the other ones, I just lined right underneath that cap. Just a tight little line. And then I took my 6 curved flat with some burnt umber, and right where that stem, I think I did it with burnt umber. No, I didn't. I stayed with that, either a liner brush or that same round with the soft black. And then I just put a little right next to that stem, like a little U shape. Got the stem on this one. Soft black. Okay, and I think on those acorns for the last little highlight, I didn't do it on the other side yet, so I'm going to do all these at one time. I just want to, I've just got my curved flat and I've just got it loaded on the toe. I'm just going to flick a little highlight right across the center of those. This is just a dry brush little highlight. Alright, now I think we're ready to move on to the lettering, because I think I'm going to want to put some wheat or straw or something coming off of this. But for now I'm going to go ahead and work on the lettering. Well, before I do the lettering, actually, I've got some white paint down here. Let's see if I can get that, some white buttermilk. I don't know when I got it on there, so I don't know if it's going to come off. I'm just using a white eraser. I dipped it in water. If the paint is pretty fresh, you can get it off without removing the paint underneath. So it's just this is just a tri eraser, and it comes out like a pencil. You can get refills for it. It's a Pentel, so okay. Before we do the lettering, I want to do some dry brushing on here. And so I'm going to use this medium Royal Stencil Brush. And I want to put some colors back into the background, and I'm going to start with my lighter colors. So I'm going to put out on my palette all of the colors so far that I've used in this. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to use all of these colors, but I want to have them available, and you just need a little dot of these colors. You don't need a whole lot, because we don't have a whole lot of area back here. But I know I need to lighten this up a little bit. So I'm going to put my yellows out and my greens. Just a little dot of each. And let's see. Then I'm going to put my my oranges and my red. Probably won't use any of these oranges, but I might use the Georgia clay. But and then I'm going to put out, I'm not going to put out cocoa. I am going to do some lavender out. And some ultramarine blue. I probably won't use this color, but I'll have it out there. I want to put some unburn some soft black out. But I'm not putting cocoa or khaki tan, because those colors, I know I will not use those colors. I've got burnt umber already. So, no. That's black plum. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how I just put little dots of these colors on my palette like this. So I can pick and choose what colors that I would like to use. Okay, now I'm going to start with my lightest color. Got me a dry brush. My lightest color is light buttermilk, and I don't want to go that bright. So I'm going to go to cad yellow and a little bit of light buttermilk. And so I'm just going to put both of those on my brush. I kind of mixed it there. Rub it off. I want to rub pretty much all of this off because I don't want it to be like bold in your face stuff. Lighten some of this up, bring it out towards the lettering. You can see I have my lettering on there already. And this is looking a little chalky, so I'm not probably going to like this too much. So I'm going to go into some more cad yellow and just pick that up on my brush. Take it off. Add some of that cad yellow in there. I'm going to go right over my lettering there because I can see it and I know where it needs to go. Okay, a little bit over here. Not really going to see too much of this. I'll probably antique the edges, so you're not going to see a whole lot of that. So that's made that look pretty good. Now I want to go into my orange. I think I'm going to go into persimmon because I want to walk that color in towards the center. A little bit. I don't want it being too bright. I don't want a line there, you know, saying, "Oh, I'm a highlight." I want it to look more natural and gradual. Okay, we know that the lightest part is going to be in the center anyway, because that's where I just went and picked up a little bit of Marigold and dirty brushed. So I'm just going to kind of rub this through the center here. persimmon. Just want to blend that. Okay, now I want to get some red. Okay, I want to start adding some touches of this red. I know that we glazed over this pumpkin already with red, but I really want to bring some more of that into the background. Alright, well I have this red. I'm going to put a little bit of it up here, not too much. Not too much of that. Alright, let's go to... Let's go to avocado next. I'm going to do that twice. I want to get a little bit more of that red out of my brush. Tone that down a little bit. Now I just want this just in some key places. I want it a little bit darker next to the leaves here. I'm going to bring that green up in there. Okay, let's go into some burnt umber now. So I'm going to put a little bit of this up here around the stem, just kind of dirty up this pumpkin a little bit. And this color down here. Just all the way around the pumpkin. When your brush starts losing paint, I mean, when it doesn't seem like you're leaving much on there, just give it a little bit more pressure and you'll be surprised how much paint is still in that brush. Okay, I want to go into a little bit of soft black because I want to put some of this up here. I dry brushed some purples up in there when I was doing purple down here. I'm going to have to come back and do a little bit of highlighting on that, looks like. So I want to put some of this down here, especially down here at this bottom. I'm going to get a little bit more on my brush. I need this more weighted down here. Dirty up that pumpkin. And dirty up down here so that it kind of tones it down a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go into my Georgia clay and persimmon mix. And I probably have to do that a couple times. Get some of that soft black out of there. I don't like this right here. It's too stark. So I'm going to put some of that orange back in there. Do that again. Okay, I think I'm going to have to float next to these leaves to get that set back in there. Alright, just put a little bit of that orange up there. Pretty good. I think I will do a little bit more yellow, and then I want to put some purple in this background. Highlight back in that. One more time with that yellow. I'm using the Marigold. No, Moon Yellow. I didn't even put Marigold out on my palette. Let me stand up so I can look at this from a distance. See how it's looking. Okay, let's get our I'm going to do some purple. Then we'll get our lettering on and see what we need to do from there. So I'm going into lavender. And now I'm going to get a little tiny bit of black plum on there. We want some purples in here. I need to put some purples on these leaves. I put some over here, but I want to make sure that I share that love. I kind of put it on the leaves close to and around where the berries are. Almost as a reflective color on there. And I want to get some of that in the background. Just a tad too light down there. To see some of that purple in there. I did put some of this in there earlier, but I'll go back and make sure it's in there. Okay, I know I want to float around this stem again. So I'm going to get my 10 curved flat, and I'm going to go into some soft black. Make sure all the water's off my ferrule here. And I want to go around this. We've kind of pushed it back in there, this stem, a little bit, but I want to Make sure it's defined a little bit. And while I have this soft black, I'm going to go up into these areas. With it as well, those deep dark areas in that stem. I'm going to take some, let's see what I want to use. I'm going to use some Georgia clay and a little bit of burnt umber. Let's see how that looks. I think I need to put a little bit of floating of this color. Using my finger to kind of smush that out so it doesn't create a very bold line there. You can also fix up any of your places where you might have messed up the edges on your leaves as well when you do this. I'm not making this super dark because I don't want it to stand out a ton. Just want to get those leaves defined a little bit where they may have got blended into the background too much. Clay and burnt umber. Okay, let's finish up on this other side. Then I think we'll move on to some lettering. Now, I was waiting till I got this piece done before I decided what color I wanted my lettering to be. darker back in here. Get that shading that it needs back there. Do the same over here. Also helps separate those leaves just a little bit. Okay, a little bit down here. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good there. Okay, now for the lettering, I like to use a round brush. And I usually use a number 2 or a number 4, depending on how big my lettering is. Putting a little soft black around the edge up here. Find that just a little bit. So let's see, what color do we want to go with for this? So many choices. I'm not really sure what would be the best way to go. Let's go with okay, I've decided on using Georgia clay. I think it will stand out on top of this orange fairly well. And then I will probably do a drop shadow. Alright, so how I do my lettering is I generally start at the top and pull down. So I never go up this way or across this way, because when you take the brush away from you when you're doing lettering, you have less control over the brush, I feel. Now, other artists may find this to be different, but I feel like you don't have as much control if you're pushing away from you. And then I just use a round brush. I like these Winsor Newton ones because it can be a round brush, or I can load it and flatten out the tip and make it a flat brush, which that's what I love about these round brushes. So you want to get a good set of round brushes to do lettering. Unless you're doing great big lettering where you need good lettering brushes that are flat. But generally for this type of stuff. Okay, so I just filled that little bump in right there, and now I'm coming around and giving more pressure. Now I'm letting up, coming up to the tip and releasing. And I just need to fill this in right here. Now when you trace your lettering and transfer it, you want to be very careful about making your lines really nice and not wobbly, if you can help it. Try to get them as close to the lettering as you can, because good lettering is just going to make your project beautiful. Now I want to get my lettering that I printed off on the computer, because this F comes across here like this, and I wanted to make sure that I saw exactly how that was supposed to go. So it's got a fat spot out here. your paint needs to be thinned with water. You cannot do lettering with thick paint. So, okay, so I'm going to fill in the end of it right here because that's the fattest part of the letter. And as you're getting ready to remove your brush from your piece, that's when you want to stop having pressure on your brush. Okay, so I'm going to finish filling in these letters. I'll probably do 2 coats and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to finish this up. Alright, I got my 2 base coats of the Georgia clay on, and then I took the tomato red and put a little bit on my brush and streaked it up from the bottom. Now from the top, I'm streaking down some jack-o'-lantern orange. So it's almost like a dry brushing right there on those letters. Just kind of letting the brush just skim across it. This jack-o'-lantern orange is not very dark, so it won't completely cover up our base coat. Okay, now we're going to do a drop shadow with soft black. You could use burnt umber if you want, but I wanted it to be a little bit more defined. So I thin my paint out with some water, inky consistency, and then I wipe my brush completely off on my paper towel. Okay, now this is where you can decide if you want the drop shadow to be on the right side or the left side. I normally do it on the left side, but I think this time I'm going to do it on the right side. So you're basically just outlining. Left side only. Okay, now this F here, see that goes over that. So that one was a little bit tricky to figure out. Okay, so that's how your drop shadowing is going to look. I think I need to thin my paint just a little bit more. Dip into some water there. Okay, so that's going to be your drop shadow. I think I'm going to have to go back with the highlight on the top, and I think I will go back with some cad yellow. It's a little bit different for me going on the right right side because I am so used to doing drop shadowing on the left. Stay up on the tip and only give it pressure when you get into those wider areas. Let's get a little bit of that cad yellow streaked across the top. So I'm just picking it up on a damp brush, wiping the excess off on my paper towel. I'm not giving much pressure at all. That was pretty bright right there. Thin my paint just a little bit. Since I got this one so bright down here, I'm going to have to brighten those up a little bit. My paint's getting just a little bit dry. Alright, and since I did that again on the top, I want to do the bottom again, but I want to stay with the red, so I'm just going to just deepen that just a little bit. Forgot the yellow on that eye there. Gotta fix that. Some yellow on that eye, and I think this is, stand back and give it a good look.